12:02 a.m. Buford Highway, Northeast Atlanta, June 5, 2026. 47 federal agents and deputies moved in 3 columns toward a chain-link fence line on the east perimeter of Magnolia Self-Storage. No vehicle lights. No radio traffic since 11:44 p.m. The only sound was gear, nylon holsters, the faint scratch of boot rubber on asphalt. The facility had been open since 2003. 240 units, climate-controlled, family-run. B+ on Yelp. Little League sponsor. The kind of business that exists in the background of every American city and is noticed by no one. Unit 247 was at the far end of the Deep Bay Row. The padlock on the door was rigged from the inside. Hook. Drop viewer into raid. Plant central question. 9 months before that entry team reached the fence line, the man who would eventually make the raid possible was sitting on a folding chair behind bulletproof glass, listening to the parking lot. His name was Marcus Hall, 31 years old, night manager. He had been hired in September 2025, 47 days after Magnolia's previous overnight attendant left for a warehouse job in Marietta. Hall had no law enforcement background. He held an associate's degree in business administration from Atlanta Metropolitan State. He had worked 2 years managing a 24-hour pharmacy and 1 year at a customer service call center before responding to a listing on Indeed for a facility attendant overnight shift, $17.40 per hour. The hours suited him. He was taking afternoon classes. He slept days. The 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. window left him time to study before he came in. Hall's duties were straightforward: manage entry desk access, monitor the camera feeds on 2 screens mounted above his station, handle after-hours access requests, document incidents in a spiral-bound notebook he kept beside the coffee maker. In his first 9 months at Magnolia, he had filled 5 pages of that notebook. 4 incidents: a slow water leak in the East Climate Wing, discovered in October; an attempted tailgate entry in November by a tenant's adult son who had lost his access code; a raccoon in the dumpster area in December, noted twice; a false alarm on the east perimeter sensors in February 2026, caused by a tree branch the maintenance crew had not trimmed. He had never logged tapping. 030 resolution Ts, where this is heading. The first time Hall heard it, he was 3 hours into a Tuesday shift in late March 2026. The lot was empty. The only active access code in the system had belonged to a plumbing contractor in Base 7, who had exited at 10:15 p.m. Hall was at his station, 3/4 through a thermos of coffee, watching the perimeter cameras cycle through their 8-second rotation. Then he heard it. Rhythmic. Not mechanical. Not the hum of the HVAC units or the settling of the metal roof. A pattern. He sat still, listening. Then he noted it in his notebook at 1:47 a.m., light tapping, direction of Deep Bays. Checked camera. Unit 247 exterior clear. No persons visible. He set the notebook down. He went back to his coffee. He heard it again in April. 3 separate occasions across that month. Always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always from the direction of the Deep Bay Row. On April 14th, he left the desk, walked the exterior of the facility, and checked the fence line perimeter. He saw nothing. No vehicles in the lot past the contractor bays. No exterior signs of activity at units 244 through 251. He noted it in the book. 3rd occurrence, Deep Bay direction. Exterior check negative. No activity visible. He underlined the word negative once and returned to the desk. What Marcus Hall knew about Unit 247 came entirely from the rental system. Units 244 through 251. 8 of the facility's 14 Deep Bay 20x40 units were registered to a single tenant entity. The company name in the system was Horizon Meridian Logistics Partners. Delaware LLC, registered address, a nominee agent office on Orange Street in Wilmington. The 8 units had been leased without interruption since November 2024. Payment method: money orders, 8 per month, all under $500, submitted by different individuals each time. A different face on the camera each month. Never the same handler twice. Policy required signed rental agreements and valid ID. Horizon Meridians was signed in person in November 2024 by a representative with a Delaware business filing and a passport. The units were rented. 11 Georgia State storage facility inspections since Magnolia opened had not flagged the property for any compliance issue. The county sheriff's office had not been called to the property in 4 years. Nothing in Hall's job description required him to question who rented what. His job was to log and report. The LLC paid on time. Storage unit contents were the tenant's business. Magnolia Self-Storage sponsored the Northeast Atlanta Little League. 60% of its tenants were small businesses: a tile contractor, an event catering company, a woman who sold vintage clothing on 3 platforms and needed the overflow. 40% were residential, people moving, downsizing, in transition. A storage facility is designed to disappear into the geography of a city. Magnolia had been disappearing successfully since 2003. But the tapping continued. Memorial Day weekend, Saturday, May 24, 2026. The temperature in Atlanta had reached 91 degrees by 3 p.m. The holiday traffic on Buford Highway had been heavy through the afternoon. Hall arrived at Magnolia at 10:45 p.m. to relieve the evening shift. The lot was quiet. Holiday weekends ran slow. Most tenants came in on weekday evenings. The facility's access logs for that Saturday evening showed 3 entries, all before 8 p.m., all routine tenants. Hall set up his thermos. He pulled the camera feeds to full brightness. He opened his notebook to a fresh page. At 1:12 a.m. Sunday, May 25th, the tapping began. It did not stop. Hall sat forward in his chair. He listened for 2 minutes, then 5. At the 10-minute mark, he rose and checked the camera feeds manually, cycling each angle. All exterior feeds showed nothing. The deep bay row was dark and still. No vehicle in the lot. No active access codes showing in that wing. At 20 minutes, he opened the exterior door and walked out to the parking lot. He stood 60 feet from the deep bay building in the warm Atlanta air and listened. He could hear it clearly from where he stood. 40 straight minutes. He went back inside. He sat at the desk. He looked at the poster on the break room wall, the one put there by the Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign. He thought, 2 years before he was hired. He'd read it in September 2025, during a slow 3 a.m. shift with nothing better to do. He had read the list of behavioral indicators associated with human trafficking at self-storage facilities. Unusual payment patterns. Single-entity multiple-unit rentals. After-hours access by rotating individuals. Padlocks installed on unit interiors. Sounds of human presence. At 3:47 a.m., Marcus Hall dialed the HSI Atlanta tip line. He did not call the facility manager. He did not call local police. He called the federal line because he had read a poster once 9 months ago, and something in the back of his mind surfaced it at 1:12 a.m. when the tapping started. He stayed on the line for 11 minutes. He described the LLC, the 8 units, the 18-month rental history, the money order payment pattern, the rotating handlers, the tapping, how long it had gone on that night, and the 3 prior occasions. He read the unit numbers directly from the rental system display while still on the phone. The HSI duty analyst who took the call was Specialist David Arellano, working the overnight intake rotation at the Atlanta field office. He flagged the tip for immediate routing to the Financial Crimes and Human Trafficking Unit, marked it high priority, and left a detailed note in the case queue. By 6 a.m., the file had been escalated to the senior duty agent. By 8 a.m., it was on the desk of Special Agent Renata Flores. Retention, 4-point. Stakes bend. This is bigger than a single tip. Here is what the investigation found before federal warrants were sealed. Horizon Meridian Logistics Partners, Delaware LLC, filed October 2024 with the Delaware Division of Corporations. Registered agent, a Wilmington nominee service that functioned as the legal address for more than 11,000 business entities. No active employees of record. No federal tax filings. No physical business address beyond the registered agent box. The company signatory listed on the formation documents was a Colombian national named Esteban Velázquez Mora. HSI databases showed a travel history entry. Velasquez Mora had entered Los Angeles International Airport in February 2022 on a B-1 business visa. He overstayed by 6 weeks and departed voluntarily. He had not entered the United States in the 4 years since that departure. His Colombian passport had expired in March 2023. The man whose name was on the formation documents for a company paying 8 money orders a month at a climate-controlled storage facility in Northeast Atlanta had not been in the country for over 4 years and had no valid travel document. Flores pulled the financial thread. Money orders purchased at multiple retail outlets, convenience stores, a check-cashing counter in Doraville, a Western Union inside a food mart on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard. Purchase dates clustered tightly between the 18th and 22nd of each calendar month, consistently, without exception, across 7 months of documented payments. Each money order purchased separately, each below the $500 threshold that triggered retail reporting requirements. 7 of the 8 regular handlers identified on Magnolia's lobby cameras had no prior criminal history. They appeared to be couriers, paid to deliver an envelope, no knowledge of what the envelope funded. This layering, clean couriers, fractional payments, nominee LLCs with foreign signatories, appeared in HSI operational case files linked to 3 prior human trafficking networks, 2 in Texas, 1 in South Carolina. All 3 had involved transit staging. Not long-term holding, not destination sites. Transit, moving people between entry points and distribution locations using storage infrastructure as temporary waypoints. Flores cross-referenced the LLC's October 2024 formation date against HSI field office activity logs. October 2024 coincided with a documented disruption of a cartel-adjacent smuggling corridor routing trafficked persons through a Phoenix-based staging network. When that network was partially dismantled in September 2024, HSI Houston had logged a subsequent geographic shift. Traffic that had moved through Arizona began appearing at Texas border crossings instead, with new staging cells identified in Houston's northwest corridor by early 2025. Flores called the Houston field office on the morning of May 26th. Houston sent a 47-page summary file by secure transfer that afternoon. The file documented a Houston-based staging cell active since late 2024, coordinating the movement of Honduran and Guatemalan nationals, processed through a temporary holding structure near the port of Houston, and then moved in small groups by van northeast towards Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte had been flagged in the Houston summary as a likely distribution terminus. The routing passed through Atlanta. Atlanta was not the destination. Atlanta was the stop between. Flores wrote 5 words in her case notes at that point: transit, not terminal, map forward. If she was right, if the people in Unit 247 were in transit and not being held for long-term purposes, then the network connected to this facility was still actively running. If federal agents moved prematurely and the network sensed it, the Charlotte end would close down, the Houston cell would disperse, and the people moving through that pipeline would vanish into infrastructure HSI had not yet mapped. What she needed was sealed warrants, a coordinated multi-site operation, and enough time to determine whether the Charlotte cell was still operational. She had a window. She had to use it without burning it. What strikes about this case, looking at the timeline, is something important. The intelligence the Houston summary provided was not new. The Houston file was dated February 2026. HSI had been tracking that corridor for more than 3 months before Marcus Hall's call. The Magnolia facility was not in the file because no one had connected the Delaware LLC to the Houston network. The connection only happened because a night manager in Atlanta read a DHS poster once in September 2025 and remembered it at 1:12 a.m. on Memorial Day weekend. There is an entire category of intelligence that only exists because someone paid attention. The structural problem is that paying attention cannot be institutionalized. I spent considerable time going through the surveillance documentation from the 11 days between Hall's call and the June 5th operation, and one detail kept pulling at me. For all the financial sophistication of the network, the nominee LLC, the fractured payment architecture, the cycling handlers, the foreign signatory, The physical infrastructure inside Unit 247 was not built for permanence. It was built for short-term utility. Sleeping pads, not cots. Vac flex duct modifications, not a proper ventilation system. A padlock rigged from the inside, not a custom door mechanism. Everything designed for one purpose: hold people well enough to keep them mobile and move on. The surveillance phase began May 27th with sealed warrants for covert camera installations at 3 access points around the Magnolia Deep Bay Row. A second camera array covered the facility's main entrance and the 2 primary vehicle exits to Buford Highway. All installations were conducted between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on consecutive nights to avoid observation during the facility's low-activity window. HSI Technical Operations had the system live by the morning of May 28th. Tactical coordination with the U.S. Marshals Service Southeastern Regional Fugitive Task Force was established on May 29th. The Marshals had the operational infrastructure for simultaneous multi-site entries across jurisdictional lines. Exactly the capacity of 5 location operations spanning 3 states would require. Preliminary site assessments for the Stockbridge, Norcross, Spartanburg, and Murfreesboro locations were completed by May 31st, based on financial cross-referencing that identified 4 additional storage units leased by LLC entities structurally identical to Horizon Meridian. On May 31st at 2:17 a.m., a gray panel van entered Magnolia's main gate using a valid access code registered to one of the Horizon Meridian units. Unregistered plates, later traced to a fraudulent Virginia title transfer. The van parked directly in front of Units 244 and 245. It remained stationary for 11 minutes. The covert camera feeds showed a figure in the driver's seat. No one exited the vehicle. No bay doors opened. The van left at 2:28 a.m., turned north on Buford Highway, and was tracked on mobile units for approximately 6 miles before losing coverage in a construction diversion near Chamblee. Flores ran the routing. North on Buford Highway to I-285, the Atlanta Perimeter Highway. From I-285, 11 miles to I-85 north, the primary corridor toward Charlotte, North Carolina. The van's 11-minute visit, during which no cargo was moved and no bay was opened, was consistent with a check-in pattern. A handler verifying that the units had not been disturbed, that conditions inside were stable, that the operation was still intact. The panel van returned on June 2nd at 2:39 a.m. This time it stayed 22 minutes. The exterior sensor on Unit 247 logged a brief magnetic disturbance consistent with a door seal breaking at 2:41 a.m. and again at 2:49 a.m. 8 minutes between those signals. Enough time to pass food, water, or instructions through a partial door opening. Not enough time to move anyone out. The obstacle that followed this observation was not logistical. It was analytical. Flores and the task force saw the connections between the Magnolia facility, the Houston file, and the Charlotte routing. But connections aren't confirmed. The Charlotte cell had not been physically located. No confirmed presence of trafficked persons at the Charlotte terminus. The decision to move on June 5th would be made without that confirmation. If you've ever had to decide between acting on incomplete information and waiting for better information while people are at risk, imagine that calculation at 3 a.m. with 11 days on the clock. There were 2 reasons the June 5th date was chosen rather than a later window. Since late March, confirmed by Hall's tapping log entries, and likely since mid to late 2025 given the November 2024 lease start date and the Houston file's timeline. The operational calculus did not support extending the window. Second, the van's return pattern, May 31st visit, June 2nd visit, suggested a movement preparation sequence. Storage transit networks typically increase access frequency in the 72 to 96 hours before a transfer. If transport began before the warrant executed, 18 with no fixed location to recover them from. Here is the take that will generate some pushback. The 11-day window between Marcus Hall's 3:47 a.m. tip call and the June 5th operation is being framed in federal press materials as an official unit on a 4-lane highway in northeast Atlanta since at minimum late March. The tapping had been noted in Hall's log in March, April, and May before he called the tip line. HSI processed the call within hours and moved professionally from that place. Paying money orders, renting storage bays, cycling handlers through a lobby on a 4-lane commercial highway 3 miles from a Walmart, without triggering a single federal flag. That is a story about how well these networks are designed to be invisible, and it is a harder story to tell than the one about the tactical coordination. What do you think? Came in? Or was the 11-day window the best possible outcome given what was known? Comment your take below. That question has been moving in these threads longer than the arrest count has. If you are watching this and want to know what happened when HSI traced the Charlotte end of this network, subscribe before you keep watching. That operation has had developments as recently as last week, and this channel covers them as they become public record. Retention point, 50% mid-roll hook, repose central question, second hook. The raid, June 5, 2026. Atlanta, 12:02 a.m. Stockbridge, 12:09 a.m. Spartanburg, 12:17 a.m. Murfreesboro, 12:17 a.m. 5 coordinated entries. 5 sealed warrants executed across 3 states within a 15-minute window. Atlanta and the 2 Georgia sites went first. The South Carolina and Tennessee entries were staged 17 minutes back to ensure Georgia containment was established before the outer ring moved. If any element of the network attempted to transmit a warning after the Atlanta entry, the outer sites needed to be moving before a courier could reach them. Magnolia Self-Storage, Northeast Atlanta. 47 agents and deputies. HSI Special Response Element on the Deep Bay Row. US Marshals on perimeter and vehicle exit point. Out of a convenience store on the opposite side of Buford Highway, ready to move on signal. The entry team reached the exterior of Unit 247 at 12:11 a.m. The outer padlock was removed in under 30 seconds using bolt cutters. The door did not yield. The interior lock, a heavy-gauge hasp bar bolted to the inside face of the corrugated steel door panel, had been installed by someone with working knowledge of storage unit construction and law enforcement entry techniques. A standard exterior hasp removal leaves the door free to open. An interior bar means the door is held from the other side. The entry team switched to a hydraulic door spreader. The spreader required a secondary insertion point along the door frame. The frame had been reinforced with a steel channel, not standard for this unit class. 90 additional seconds. The entry team made the secondary insertion at the lower corner of the door frame, where the reinforcement ended. The hydraulic spreader fractured the frame at 12:13 a.m. and the door opened. The tactical flashlights cut into the interior of Unit 247. Children, to reach the switch. 3 5-gallon water jugs along the east wall, 2 of them partially full. Packaged food on a flat plastic crate, rice crackers, canned goods with pull tabs, peanut butter packets, and single-serve of foil protein bars. Sufficient supply for approximately 3 to 4 days by later field assessment. 2 portable chemical toilets in the rear corner behind a section of vinyl curtain suspended from a cable. Ventilation. 2 4-inch flex ducts cut into the facility's main vac trunk line running above the bay ceiling. The cuts were clean and finished with mastic sealant. Someone with HVAC trade knowledge had made those modifications. The ducts ran back to the central climate control system, serving the Deep Bay Row. The temperature inside Unit 247 at 12:13 a.m. was 74 degrees Fahrenheit. The ambient exterior temperature was 68. The HVAC connection had kept the bay within a livable range. The entry, no acute trauma requiring emergency transport. The federal prosecutor's affidavit would later describe the conditions of the bay as maintained for continuous habitation. Institutional language, for the fact that someone had been managing the environment with enough regularity to sustain the health over an extended transit period. All 18 were moved to the facility's main gate staging area within 12 minutes. The DHS child welfare contractors crossed Buford Highway and were on site by 12:26 a.m. If you have been following this story and thinking about Marcus Hall sitting in that folding chair at 1:12 a.m., with the tapping carrying 40 straight minutes through a concrete parking lot, if you have been asking yourself what it costs to hear something like that and call the right number, this is the number: 18. It is a specific and finite count. That is what the call was worth. If you are not subscribed to this channel and you have made it this far into this story, hit subscribe now, because the number from the Charlotte end is not in this record yet. And when it is, we will be here. At 12:16 a.m., Units 244 through 251 were cleared sequentially. Units 244, 245, 246, and 248 contained ordinary stored cargo, moving boxes, wrapped furniture, plastic-covered pallets of household goods. 3 of these units showed signs of recent habitation: disturbed flooring, food wrappers pushed to corners, water staining on the concrete consistent with multiple container placements over time. These units had been occupied. They had been cleaned between occupants. Unit 247 was the active one. Units 249 and 250 contained documentation material: physical binders with printed financial ledger pages, laminated access cards for storage facilities in 5 states, most of them expired or partially defaced, individual plastic bags containing burner phones, 14 phones in Unit 249, 11 in 250. Agents ran power checks. 6 of the 25 phones were still active. One showed a message received at 11:52 p.m. on June 4th, 10 minutes before the Atlanta entry team had gone over the fence line. The message was a single character, the number 0. No other context. No sender identification. Unit 251 contained cash, U.S. currency, bundled and rubber-banded in blocks of varying denomination. The field inventory documented $412,000. This was not the total financial output of the network. This was the cash on hand at a single transit site on the night of the raid. Meanwhile, Stockbridge, Georgia, 14 miles south of Atlanta. 2 units at a competing storage facility leased under an LLC registered in Wyoming. No persons found on entry. Physical evidence: 3 sleeping pads, 2 water jugs, both empty, food wrappers in quantity consistent with a group of 8 to 10 individuals, over several days. The last access entry in the facility's log, June 1st, 4 days before the raid. The Stockbridge site had been vacated. The facility manager, who met the marshals at the door that night, said the company had been a regular tenant. Quiet. Paid on time. He had seen the same face dropping off payments twice, maybe 3 times over the course of the lease. A man, medium height. He did not have a description beyond that. He had never thought to write it down. Norcross, Georgia. 1 unit. Evidence of occupation: disturbed sleeping area, empty containers, a child, single shoe. No pair. Vacated within the previous 48 hours. The Norcross site had been moving out when the Atlanta site was still active. Spartanburg, South Carolina. 1 unit. Vacant. Empty containers. And on the floor near the rear wall, a single piece of documentation that had not been removed with the rest of the material. A folded sheet of notebook paper, handwritten in Spanish. A column of names, 18 names, each followed by a number. HSI forensic linguists assessed the numbers as consistent with ages, ranging from 6 to 14. This piece of paper was entered as evidence as Government Exhibit 7 in the subsequent federal prosecution. Murfreesboro, Tennessee. 1 unit. Vacant. All physical material removed. But on a shelf mounted to the back wall, still plugged into a power strip, still powered, a wireless router. Factory default settings, never reconfigured. Network name Linksys 7A42. The router's internal access log, extracted by HSI technical agents, showed connections from devices consistent with prepaid Android handsets. Connection timestamps bracketed overnight windows across a 4-month period. The timestamps aligned with the Magnolia access logs from the same period. Within minutes, someone in Murfreesboro had been remotely monitoring the Atlanta facility. One detail stuck with me going through the exhibit record after the fact. The Murfreesboro router showed its most recent device connection at 11:48 p.m. on June 4th, 14 minutes before the Atlanta entry team crossed the fence line. Someone had been connected to a monitoring device linked to the Magnolia site 14 minutes before the raid began. Whether they saw anything anomalous, whether any alert was generated, whether the Charlotte terminus received any warning in that 14-minute window, this is not definitively answered in the sealed indictment, material available as of this recording. The Charlotte cell has not been publicly confirmed as dismantled. The arrests made in connection with the June 5th operation totaled 9 individuals across the 5 sites, secured within 72 hours of the initial entries. 2 were taken at Magnolia during the primary breach. A man later identified as a local subcontracted courier operating through 3 layers of intermediary shell entities, and a woman who had been in a vehicle in Magnolia's parking lot at the time of the perimeter lockdown and fled on foot before being secured by a Marshals perimeter element 60 yards from the main gate. She was carrying a prepaid phone, $8,400 in cash, and a handwritten list of 3 addresses in Charlotte, North Carolina. Those addresses were transmitted to HSI Charlotte within 40 minutes of her arrest. 7 additional individuals were arrested in the 72 hours following the Magnolia entry. 6 in Georgia and 1 in a motel in Chattanooga, Tennessee. All 9 face charges under 18 U.S.C. 1591 and 1594. Conspiracy to engage in 4 of the 9 faced additional charges related to money laundering and document fraud connected to the LLC structure. The courier apprehended at Magnolia entered a cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutor's office within 10 days of his arrest. His cooperation confirmed the Charlotte addresses as active and identified a contact name linked to the Charlotte end. Whether that contact was arrested and what the Charlotte operation looked like at the time it was reached is not in the public record as of June 10th. What is in the public record? 2 individuals identified in the Houston summary file as operational coordinators for the movement network, the people who managed the logistics between the Texas border and the Atlanta transit point, were not located within the 72-hour window. One was traced to a pedestrian border crossing in Laredo, Texas, on June 3rd, 2 days before the raid. A crossing that, based on timing, was either routine or anticipated. He crossed into Mexico without incident. He has not been located since. Whether his departure on June 3rd was coincidence or preparation is one of the unanswered questions in this case. The second coordinator is simply missing. No exit record. No confirmed domestic location. As of this recording, that individual remains unlocated. Retention point, last 60s, payoff plus open loop towards Charlotte. Esteban Velasquez Mora, the Colombian national whose name appeared on the Horizon Meridian LLC formation documents, was reached by Colombian federal authorities for questioning in Bogotá in the weeks following the raid. He stated that he had been approached in 2024 by an intermediary offering $800 to sign documents for what was described to him as a business formation service. He stated he had no further involvement in any activities connected to the company. Whether that account is sufficient to defeat the federal conspiracy charges named against him in the sealed indictment. Charges that were expected to be unsealed following extradition proceedings will be tested in court if and when he is extradited. The sentencing picture as of June 2026 is incomplete. No trials have concluded. No sentences have been delivered. The 9 arrested individuals are in federal custody pending proceedings. The cooperation agreement from the Magnolia courier is active. The Charlotte addresses provided by the woman arrested at the fence line were transmitted to HSI Charlotte. What those addresses produced is not yet in the public record. The $412,000 recovered from Unit 2 and 51 represents the visible edge of the network's cash flow at a single site. The full financial architecture, the upstream funding mechanism connecting the Houston staging cell to the Charlotte distribution end, and whatever organizational layer sits above both, is under active investigation. HSI's Financial Crimes Unit has issued document preservation orders to 11 financial institutions. No total asset forfeiture figure has been publicly announced. The gray panel van photographed on May 31st and June 2nd has not been recovered. 4 subsequently identified as having been reported missing from San Pedro Sula, Honduras. Their families had been contacted by a service that described itself as a relocation assisted toward legal entry points, with documentation assistance included in the service fee. They did not know what transit looked like. 18 children, 2 operational coordinators unlocated, 1 Charlotte cell unconfirmed, 1 panel van still moving somewhere between Atlanta and wherever it stopped. Will this network reassemble in a different form in the next 18 months? Comment yes or no. Because the infrastructure that sustained this operation for 18 months, the nominee LLCs, the fractional cash payments, the rotating couriers, the storage bay network across 5 states, that infrastructure is not unique to this case. It is a model, and dismantling one instantiation of a model does not retire the model. Magnolia Self-Storage reopened to its regular tenants on June 8th. The Deep Bay Row, units 241 through 256, remained under federal preservation order as of this recording. The facility issued a statement confirming full cooperation with investigators. Magnolia is not named in any criminal complaint. Marcus Hall's spiral-bound notebook, the one he kept beside the coffee maker, with its 5 pages of logged incidents, the one where he wrote light tapping, direction of deep bays. Checked camera. Unit 247 exterior clear. No persons visible. At 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in March, was entered into evidence as Government Exhibit 3. The network is dismantled. The Charlotte cell is not. Sula to a storage unit on Buford Highway still exists.